Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm super excited. Today we're going to be talking about main character energy. And if you've been in society in any way in the last 10 years or so, this term has taken quite a bit. In fact, if you do a Google search and you type in main character energy on the trend section, you will find a significant increase in search queries for this concept. And I think one of the reasons that is because people all over the world are yearning to take responsibility for their lives. People all over the world are yearning to create a life that they absolutely love, or at least are happy with fundamentally, right? That's kind of the idea here is, whether I'm going to build a multi-million-dollar business, whether I'm going to live on a cabin by the creek, whatever it is, I need to build a totally fulfilled life. It's essential for human living, right? If you're not building a fulfilled life, if you're not building your ideal life, you're living a life that's asleep. You're living a life according to other people's design. And I don't know about you, but I'm not a big fan of living according to other people's ideas of what I need to do. And so what we're going to be talking about today is a 7-point approach that you can take immediately to start emitting and actually oozing that main character energy out of your life. See, when I talk about emitting, I talk about oozing, I talk about actually stepping into the place where you're not only happy with your decisions, but you're making them consciously and you're choosing all of the big things that are going on, but also all of the little things. You're choosing all the stories that you're telling yourself. You're choosing how you're responding to situations. And if you're not choosing in every moment, at least you're trying to choose. You're trying to understand how the stories that you tell yourself turn into the reality that you experience. And ultimately what you're doing is you're learning and achieving the skills, the concepts, the mindset, belief, the whole holistic picture of creating your life. And so today we're going to take a 7-point approach for doing this, along with some incentive and some direction. So what I'm going to do is kind of share with you what this 7-point approach is, what it's done for me, and how you can begin to make this actually work and change your life. One of the biggest aspects of people that emit that main character energy is they're not emitting that backstage extra energy. You know what I mean? Like, I know that goes unstated almost, but if you notice, anybody that's truly happy, that's truly fulfilled with their life, they're not just letting things happen. And while there's a degree of that, right, you have to learn how to surrender. You have to learn how to allow things to unfold. Oftentimes in business and the process of personal transformation, the process of waiting and surrendering to what is unfolding can be absolutely daunting. In fact, surrendering can be more daunting than extreme hustle, because at the end of the day, surrender requires us to observe how our actions, not just the actions, the consciousness behind our actions is affecting and unfolding in the world around us. There's a delicate balance here. And ultimately, though, regardless of whether you're surrendering or you're taking massive action, the first point of our 7-point framework here is agency, right? Agency is a term that describes not only people that are selling social media services, but it describes taking responsibility for your life, right? It involves taking actual ownership over everything that's going on, not necessarily what's happening to you, and yes, to a degree, what's happening to you, but we're not trying to get you to put the world on your shoulders. You don't need to save the world. But what we're taking responsibility, we're taking full ownership for is the choices I make moment to moment, right? Sure, we have to work, we have jobs. If you have a job, that's totally okay. The question is not what you're doing when you're supposed to be working. The question is what you're doing when you're not working. And I get it, right? I get it. You can be tired after work. You can want to just relax. But the truth is, if you have a job and you're trying to create a life that you love, you have to take responsibility for everything that you're doing, both in and out of the workplace. And this can be a hard conversation to have with yourself. And I get it, right? And I really want it to be known here that there's not a ton of judgment for you if you're finding yourself having this conversation with yourself, right? Because it's hard. It can be really hard to confront the parts of myself that are not necessarily where I want them to be. A lot of the times in more spiritual work, we call this shadow work. We say we're looking at the parts of ourselves that aren't necessarily up to par with our ideals. And I think one of the first steps in taking full agency over your life is the ability to have grace with the parts of yourself that are not working out necessarily, right? The parts of yourself that are not up to par, the parts of yourself that may not be currently according to your ideals. And if you've not started creating your ideal life, then maybe there's a lot of that going on, and that's okay, right? The one thing that's really, really important to understand, I saw this in a Mel Robbins quote on Instagram, there's no deadline on your dreams. You know what I mean? But that being said, you need to get started now, right? We need to start integrating the parts of ourselves that are not necessarily up to par with where we want to be. So taking ownership, taking responsibility, that's exactly what that means. That means looking at when I get home, right? Looking at, do I really need to go watch TV in this moment? Or can I go work on something that can make me a little bit of progress towards where I want to go, right? And here's the thing, there's nothing wrong with TV. I'm not here to crap on people who watch TV or play video games, none of those things. I think those can be tremendously healthy detachment mechanisms, right? But that's not really what we're talking about. The context of what we're talking about here is when I get home after work, or maybe I have a day off and I have the opportunity to build in the direction of what I want, or continue to do the same things that have gotten me where I am currently, right? I have a choice in that moment. That's what taking ownership means. It means making the choice to do things that may be hard in the moment, but in the end are going to breed longer, better results, right? That's kind of what we're really looking at here, is taking responsibility. Now, here's the thing. We're not just talking about taking responsibility for our beliefs, for our habits, our stories, our actions. We're looking at holistic ownership, right? We're looking at, okay, when I'm in a moment of contrast, how am I responding to that situation? How am I responding? Because ultimately, how I respond plays a major factor in how something unfolds. I have to understand and take ownership, right? And if I don't take ownership, I can't understand. And if I don't understand, I won't make progress that moves me in the direction that I want to go. It's not get there tomorrow. It's one step at a time, one day at a time, right? That's the paradox that we're dealing with here, is taking ownership, taking radical responsibility of your life means taking ownership every single day, presently, holistically, and fully. And that's really where we're getting at when we're talking about this concept of agency, right? We're saying, I am no longer going to settle for the parts of myself that are not up to par with where I want to be. I am choosing to do the work that's necessary to get these aspects of myself where I want to go, so that I can truly not only embody, right, the end of where I am, right? Because we understand that the states of consciousness that we exhibit ultimately produce themselves in our experience, right? But here's the thing. How can you embody the end, or how can you embody the end of your, the ideal life that you want, if you're not actively reconciling the parts of yourself that are not on par with that to that level of yourself, right? If the ideal life is you, active, you're outdoors, you're all these different things, right? But you don't ever go outside, you're not in shape, like, exactly what you need to do here, right? It's a matter of getting in the gym. It's a matter of choosing to go outdoors more, all these different things, right? I don't need to go through the semantics of it, but taking that ownership, taking that responsibility involves me examining top to bottom holistically what's happening internally around these things that I want, right? Am I experiencing a ton of resistance in my body? Because if I am, I need to really begin to understand that. I need to begin to observe it. I need to begin to identify it so I can really understand what's going in my body that is contrary to what I want to experience. Because if it's contrary to what I want to experience, if there's a ton of activity and energy in my body that is contrary to the energy that I want to experience in my world, I'm rarely, if ever, going to experience that energy, because I have to learn how to cultivate it in here. And one of the best ways to do that is to proactively move in the directions of your dreams, right? It's not just sitting on your couch hoping that something happens. It's living with the confidence that you are the totality of the universe experiencing itself and going after things that you don't even think you can do, right? Going to that place where you're taking so much responsibility for yourself that you're understanding your stories, you're understanding your actions, you're understanding your reactions, you're understanding everything that's going on inside of you, the dynamics of you on a personal level, and then taking that and running with it on the biggest level possible for you, right? What that is for you is going to be different to every single individual, right? But you need to understand that after you begin to take responsibility, then we're going to be moving into identity, right? This is where we begin to understand how our beliefs, all of the things that we are choosing to entertain about ourselves, actually become a part of our experience, because our beliefs aren't necessarily confirmed in front of us like, a raindrop that falls from the sky. They're confirmed in our experience by the tonality of the reality that we experience, right? Our beliefs are shaping and shading our experience through the lens of how we interpret what's going on around us. Because the truth is, looking at a blank piece of paper, two different people looking at it have completely different ideas, completely different frames of mind as to what that paper means, what's going to happen with that paper. There's totally a million different things. This is why two people can look at a sunset and see something completely different, because what's happening is the meaning that's been assigned, the experiences that have been had, that have written themselves into that person's nervous system, completely define how they experience what they're experiencing. And then on top of that, influence the experience itself, right? So your job here is to begin to understand how your identity shapes your reality, right? How what you are experiencing and how you interpret what you are experiencing actually perpetuates what you experience. Now, we're going to get into a little bit of a theoryality here, a little bit of woo, but I think it's really, really important, right? One of Napoleon Hill's mentors, Charles Hannell, he said that you can only do to the extent that you can be, and you can only be to the extent that you are. And what you are is determined by what you believe to be true about yourself. And I think this is such an interesting concept because it tells me that no matter how hard I try to do something, until I believe that I actually can, and not that I believe I can, but I believe that I am the person that does this thing regularly, will I ever do it regularly, right? It's really, really important to understand how the body itself is a matrix that ultimately shows us what is and is not capable for us in this world, right? What you believe to be true, what you believe is possible, what you believe the norm is, all of these different things. The amazing thing about this is that none of them are objectively true, right? You can let go of all of your limiting beliefs today or in any moment when you understand that it fundamentally is not a truth about yourself. And this is where we begin to go into sort of the Eastern side, the mystical side of reality. The awareness that is aware of your thoughts is the same awareness that spawned this entire universe into existence, right? I am not Michael having a much larger experience. I am this larger being having an experience convinced I am Michael. I'm not convinced I'm Michael anymore. You might be, but I'm not. And I'm not convinced you're you either. I'm convinced you are this singular awareness that is having an experience of individuality. Now, here's the thing, right? The awareness of that alone can radically transform how you approach your life. It can radically transform how things unfold for you. See, as long as I'm convinced that I'm this tiny being, that I'm this, little puny human in this massive universe that does not care, there's value in that perspective, but most of the time it keeps me fighting, right? It keeps me moving against the tide of things. And I think that this is something that so many of us underestimate. There's so much power in shifting your fundamental worldview about yourself, right? Your fundamental concept. And the truth is, you're not going to get to where you want to go until your concept of yourself, your fundamental ideas, your fundamental beliefs about yourself reflect that of the person that you want to be. And that's why this belief work, it's not just one-sided. It's not just sitting in a room and wishing that things happen. It's embodying the belief that you are what you want to be and then going out, taking massive action and watching that reproduce itself in your world. And it may not show up 100% of the time. You're going to fail. I have failed a million times when it comes to building the life of my dreams. I've also succeeded tremendously, right? You're not defined by the times that you fail. You're defined by two times, the times that you succeed and the times that you give up. Nobody's going to give a crap about the fact that you failed unless you give up, right? That's when people are going to say, oh, they gave up. But nobody gives a crap about how many failures somebody has had when they're succeeding. And they think this is something that trips so many people up. It's okay to fail, dude, right? The stories that you carry inside may not always 100% directly translate immediately into your environment, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you need to stop focusing on your identity and how that emotional energy that circulates through your nervous system affects you throughout the day, right? We have a process, a reality hacker called offloading. It's tremendously powerful in releasing a lot of that dense energy that exists when we're constantly entertaining stories of, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I don't know if I deserve this. I don't know if I'm worthy of this, right? All of those stories that creep up when we actually begin to move towards the direction of our ideal life. The offloading process really supports releasing the heaviness of it. Because if you notice, when you begin to tell those really limiting stories, it shows up in your body, right? You get heavy, you get dense, you get, oh, I don't want to move. I don't want to do this. The offloading process completely allows us to almost filter that energy, right? Release it from our bodies and move back to that space of lightness, because that's what you need, right? Here's a really interesting thing that correlates physics to spirituality, right? When you are lightest in your body, when your stories, your inner stories, your beliefs, your body is full of flow, right? You're treating yourself right, you're eating right, you're thinking right, you're doing right, you're least dense and you're making the most progress. And it's so interesting because light, right? The speed limit in this universe is light, which has no mass density. Light travels the fastest when there's no mass density to interfere with it. So you carrying around all these limiting stories actually decreases the speed at which you achieve your goal. And not only it decreases the speed, it also decreases the efficiency of you building partnerships and relationships and meeting the people that are a part of your ideal that is realized. And ultimately, when it comes to building that ideal life, what we have to understand is the concept of character creation. I love this concept because it really helps solidify science, right? The science behind our bodies is that every 7 months, every single atom is completely renewed and transformed. Every 7 months, I don't know how many trillions of atoms are in your body are completely renewed, right? Completely turned into something new. And this is science. You can go look it up. I don't need to continue going down that road. What's so interesting to me is that we wake up for 10, 20, 30, 40 years and we believe the same things about ourselves. We say the same things about ourselves. We talk the same way to ourselves, right? We don't change anything. And it's so interesting because now we're beginning to understand scientifically the power of epigenetics, the power to literally transform DNA through consistent thought. Neuroplasticity is another amazing example of this. I'm beginning to understand that my literal neural pathways, the way I think, the way I process, the way I do, can absolutely be transformed by consistent focus on my ideal, right? I mean, neuroplasticity is, from a scientific level, probably one of the most amazing discoveries in human history, right? Mystics have known this all along, right? I mean, 2,000 years ago, there was a man walking around saying, hey, change the way you think about yourself, or else you're going to lead yourself to total desecration and desperation, right? If you do that, if you change the way you think about yourself, you will actually transform the way you live your life. There was a man, and he created a really popular, his followers created a really popular religion, but we've known this as a species for a very long time, that you changing the way you process yourself, process the world around you, can be radically powerful in transforming how you go about your day, how things unfold for you. And so when it comes to this concept of character creation, the best way to apply this is looking in the morning, right? The morning when we wake up. When you wake up, you literally have zero obligation to be the person that you were yesterday afternoon, yesterday morning. Who is telling you that you have to think the same way, that you have to process the same way, that you have to approach your life in the same exact way you approached it yesterday? The amazing thing about this is that if I choose to approach my life in a new way, science now tells me that I'm actually working on creating new neural pathways. If I'm responding differently, or if I'm choosing to interact differently, to start with my day, if I'm choosing instead of just to wake up and get on my phone, I'm waking up, I'm practicing gratitude, I'm going for a walk, I'm drinking water. The more I do that, right, the more that becomes a habit for me. And we're going to get to that down in one of the later points of this topic. But this idea of character creation is the concept that I can wake up and I can choose a new state of consciousness. And when we're talking about states of consciousness, we're talking about total emotional immersion, total, not just emotional, but mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual immersion, right? Our state of consciousness is the sum total of what we're believing to be true in any given moment. And what we're believing to be true shows up in our body. It can't help but show up in our body. Our beliefs actually create biochemical responses inside of our body. And this is exactly why you can only do to the extent that you can be. And if you need research on this, go ahead and read The Master Key System by Charles Haanel, probably one of the greatest mystical combined with self-help physical science books ever. And it was actually written in the early 1900s, I think maybe 1896, 1904, I believe is when it was written. But it goes through the science of this belief process. It goes through the science of how the stories you tell yourself turn into actual physical manifestations, not in your body, but in your world. And considering that was written in 1904, we've lived 19 years since then. There's a lot more science that shows us that we don't have to be the same person we were yesterday. And the day I choose a new character, right? The day I choose to begin operating from a new place is the day my world begins to shift slowly but surely. And this is something you can absolutely try. You know, your ability to wake up and choose a set of beliefs, truly get into a new state of consciousness. Watch how your world begins to reflect it, right? If you wake up and you choose to get in a state of gratitude, you choose to get into a state of gratitude, you're immediately going to perceive abundance because you're grateful. Gratitude is the complete synonym, right, for the manifestation of abundance. Most people hate where they're at. They hate where, they're not, all these different things. And because of that, they produce this consciousness of lack. You can't be in the consciousness of lack and create abundance. You can't, right? Like, right? You're not going to plant an apple seed and expect to see an orange tree, right? You're going to plant an apple seed and you're going to get an apple, right? Because like becomes of itself. And so every single morning you have the opportunity to put on new metaphysical shoes, right? Metaphorical shoes. You have the opportunity to choose a new shirt design. You have the opportunity to choose how you're going to interpret people that piss you off during the day. You're going to choose what's the most important things for you. You're going to choose how, why, what, who, where, when. Every little detail of yourself, you get the opportunity. You get to choose the hat, the shirt, the pants, the jeans, right? The shoes, the character attributes. You absolutely do, because if you want more strength attributes, you go to the gym. You make that a part of your morning routine. I can guarantee you'll see the character creation process prove itself to you over and over and over again. And I venture to go and say that if you look back over your life and you look at the beliefs that you currently have, you'll be able to trace, if you're honest with yourself, you'll be able to trace those beliefs back to many of the experiences that you tend to have over and over and over and over again. Because character creation is not just choosing an affirmation and saying, oh, I am rich today. It's not just about that. It's also about how I'm interpreting and responding to situations around me, right? Because how I respond to situations is a very clear image of what I'm believing to be true in that moment. And as we talked about earlier, how I respond to situations oftentimes deeply affects how a situation unfolds, right? If somebody comes to me with some sort of attitude and I respond with an attitude in turn, it's most likely just going to heat both of us up. And this is where we get to the emotional intelligence aspects of this, right? If you want to create the life of your dreams, you need to be focused on creating win-wins for everyone around you. Somebody comes to you, right? They're an asshole. It doesn't really matter. You need to learn how to create a win-win, because you interpreting that situation to be a personal attack, it's not only going to take away from your energy, it's going to drain you. It's going to escalate a problem with somebody that honestly you don't need to have a problem with. And then in turn, you're just going to create more enmity, and you're going to have to work on getting out of that state of frustration, right? How you interpret the events of the world directly affects how you experience the world. This could not be a major factor. And so when you're taking this character creation aspect, right? You're taking the concept and you're running with it. You're not just waking up in the morning and you're building that routine that serves your ideal self, but throughout the day, you're ensuring that your actions, your beliefs, your words, they align with that character that you're creating. That's what we're looking at here, is we're looking at aligning everything that I'm doing with the character that I'm creating. And this is a process that we take, and we don't see it immediately, but we see it run over time again and again and again and again, right? Your ability to persist in a new story, in new beliefs, right? In new actions solidifies that self-concept in your life, which literally turns you into that person. You have the ability to become whatever you want, because you are not your ego. You are what is aware of your ego. And the ego itself is a ridiculously malleable entity that has no objectivity in and of itself, but instead becomes whatever you condition it to be. And that leads us literally into our next point, where we're talking about designing our life according to our ideals. Right? I want you to think about your ideals in life, your ideal weight, your ideal house, your ideal wife, your ideal bank account size, your ideal everything that you truly want. I want you to just take a list. I want you to write it down. I want you to write down your ideal. And I want you to ask yourself for a second, are you designing your life according to those ideals? Right? Are you designing your life according to those ideals? And if you're not, this will give you a key insight into why you're not actually hitting those ideals. Because the truth is, when you commit to hitting your ideals, you're going to have one of two things happen. You're either going to fail or you're going to succeed. There's nothing else that can happen. But most people, they don't believe that they can get what they want, so they don't even begin to design according to what it is that they want. And here's where you can begin to separate yourself from everybody around you, designing your life according to what you truly want, right? If you want to be able to lift 500 pounds, okay, you need to put a regimen in place to get you to that point, right? If you don't want to do that, that's totally fine, right? That's obviously just one example here. If you want to build, a multi-million-dollar business, you need to begin to design your life according to that and live from that place. So what that means when we're talking about designing according to it and living from it is when I'm doing business stuff, when I'm hanging around business, when I'm building my business, I'm doing a couple things, right? If I want to build a multi-million dollar business, I need to be around people that have built multi-million dollar businesses. So that's what I'm doing first off. So I'm finding people that have built the kind of business that I want to build. And then what I'm doing is I'm beginning to look at the thoughts, the beliefs, the habits, the stories that they have. And I'm beginning to look at that in relation to the thoughts, the stories, the beliefs, the actions that I believe that I should be taking at my ideal, right? And I'm beginning to combine those two. And all of a sudden, dude, I'm developing a very, very clear blueprint for my ideal life and what that means, right? If I want to maintain this level of weight, guess what, man? I can go to ChatGPT and get some help on that immediately. And then I can begin to develop a habit, a process around getting to that ideal and then maintaining it, right? Food counts, people have a million different exercise opinions, and I'm not an exercise expert, so I'm not going to actually, tell you what you need to do in that end. But what I am saying here is that ultimately you need to get to that place internally and then begin to make your external life look like that as much as possible. Again, we need to remember that you're not your ego. You're not all of the experiences you've had. You're not the sum total of your experiences. You're not. That's not who you are. You're an infinite being having a finite experience. And most people that don't get to this, I would venture to say everybody that never gets to this place doesn't really understand what it means. But when you begin to understand what it means, you begin to be able to embody it, right? Just because your life says one thing does not mean you're limited to that thing. And being able to actually develop the beliefs and the stories of the person that you want to be leads you down the path to actually becoming that person, right? So we're talking about designing according to our ideals. And now we're not just talking internal, we're talking external. So now I'm doing one thing. I'm waking up and I'm recognizing the fact that I am an infinite being having a finite experience. So I'm exploring the sensations, right? The images, the energy of my ideal life. And then I'm beginning to build them out, right? I'm beginning to take the action that I need to take. I am doing the amount of calls that I need to make. I am building the relationships I need to build. I am building the products that I need to build, right? I am iterating and iterating and iterating, right? Because I'm not worried about not becoming. I'm not worried about not becoming. And once you commit to this, you need to let go of that worry because you absolutely get what you embody, right? You don't get what you want, you get what you embody. So if all of your commitment is around embodying the person that you want to be, both internally and externally, I can guarantee you, dude, you're not going to help but get it. I'm living proof. Everybody at Reality Hacker is living proof that you focus from a place, you begin to experience that place. Most people don't get to where they want because they get afraid of actually getting it. They get close, they may begin to touch it, then everything begins to come up. What if I'm not worthy? What if I don't deserve it? What if I'm this? What if I'm that? That's why the offloading process, as we talked about previously, is so powerful. Because the truth is you are worthy, you do deserve it. But you need to give yourself that worthiness, right? You need to give yourself the right to try and fail and succeed, right? You need to give yourself the permission to do that. And when you truly embody those beliefs of worthiness, of deservedness, you're not going to be afraid to try. You're not going to be able to be afraid to try and fail because you know that no matter what, you're becoming that person. And even if you don't, here's the thing, even if you don't become that person, you've spent literally all of your time trying to do that, which most likely means that you're pretty fulfilled, unless what you're pursuing is tremendously vain, right? If what you're pursuing is vain, then all the work that you're doing to become that will most likely be vain too. But if you're building a life according to your purpose, your vision, your passions, right? Even the process of becoming is something that you get excited about, something you get fulfilled in. And you tell me, is it more exciting and fulfilling to just do what you don't want to do because you don't think you can actually do what you want to do? Or is it more exciting and fulfilling to try and do what you want to do and then most likely actually get there? Right? Goes unspoken. And so what I need to be doing is I need to be designing according to my ideal life, right? I need to be designing my friendships, my relationships, my processes for my life, my SOPs, right? You need to have SOPs for your life. If you don't have SOPs, you're not going to organize, you can't systemize, and then you can't scale. It's as true for a business as it is for individuals, right? So what I need to understand here is that creating SOPs that align with my ideal life and then radically and relentlessly executing on those SOPs And I'll be honest with you, depending on how quickly you execute on those SOPs and how consistently you execute on them, that will be a major factor in the type of progress that you see, right? I think it's so important that you have those systems in place, you run with them, and I know it's important that you have the systems in place, you run with them, and then you see them solidified by the experiences that you have. And this is the faith part of creating your ideal life. You begin to tell yourself the stories, and I'm not talking about mentally, I'm talking about your body, right? Your body needs to feel the stories of you being who you are is completely true. That's the energy I want to take into the action that I'm taking. Because if you go into a situation feeling powerless, you will be powerless. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be powerless. And there's an anomalous time, right? There's a 10th time, a 1 out of 10, that you may go into a situation powerless and you find yourself feeling powerful. That's an anomaly. And sure, an anomaly may dictate that something has partial truth. But I don't want a partial truth. I want majority truth, right? And the majority truth is that going into your day feeling ridiculously powerful, like you are already who you want to be, is one of the greatest biochemical hacks that you can put into your life, because it literally empowers you to do every single thing that you want to do. And in fact, studies have been shown now that tell us that people that use this kind of stimulation in their body have a higher chance of reaching their goals and having a fulfilled life. This isn't even just mystical anymore, right? This is scientific fact. And this is a major aspect of having that main character energy, is designing your life according to your ideals, not settling for less, not settling for less than you know you want to be true, right? You know you want to have the impact you want to make. You can't settle for less, because if you settle for less, you're going to get less. So the choice really comes into your court now. The ball is in your court. You're going to settle for less, or you're going to step into everything that you want to be. And that leads us right into the concept of reverse engineering, right? I think that reverse engineering is one of the greatest ways to get where you want to go, because reverse engineering is literally working backwards from the point of finished product. And this is why it's so important that you have the types of people that embody, that imbibe what you want to create in your life, or at least you're trying to pursue relationships with them. Because here's the thing, if you don't know what a successful X, right, insert ideal here, looks like, it's going to be nearly impossible for you to emulate it, right? And I think that you don't need, it's not about you becoming a carbon copy of somebody else. It's about you understanding the dynamics and the equational factors in success, right? Because what is success? Success is an outcome that has, an outcome, the end of an equation that has 2 of the right variables, or 3 of the right variables, or 5 of the right variables, or 10 of the right variables involved, right? Success is an outcome where the right variables have been put into play, okay? And so for you here, right, your job is to find examples of what your success looks like, right? And I'm not just talking about getting a Ferrari, right? Like just watching a guy who drives a Ferrari. It's not, right? We're trying to go a little bit more substantial here, right? Building a successful mission-driven business, right? Creating your ideal body, right? Or your ideal eating, or your ideal career path, all these different things. Your journey to doing that can be supported by finding successful examples of that. Because when you have the examples, you see the variables. And when you see the variables, you can begin to take those variables in your own life and rework them for your own success. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to give you a really big secret here. Success, especially in business, it's just like the music industry, right? It's taking existing powerful, popular chords and progressions and putting your own creative spin on them. And granted, yes, there's an opportunity for complete innovation, but there are very few businesses in the world today who just innovate something from nothing. Most innovation today is taking existing success and putting its own creative spin on it. And that's exactly what you need to do here, right? Whether it's your body, again, whether it's your eating habits, whether it's your business, whether it's your relationships, you need to find successful examples and iterations of what you're wanting. And in that, you're going to be able to find the variables that you can begin to put into play. Because I can tell you what, it's not about the fact that you're ill-equipped. It's not about the fact that you're not good enough, you're not worthy, you're not smart enough. None of those things are true. You just don't have enough examples of what your ideal looks like in your life, because I can guarantee you, dude, if you completely transformed your friend group, if you completely eliminated all your friends and family, and the only 5 people you allowed into your life were people that successfully emulated every area of your life that you want to successfully emulate, you would literally eventually become those people, because you take on the habits, the beliefs, the stories, the dynamics of the people that you surround yourself with the most. And I cannot speak enough to finding successful iterations of what you want, because then you can get to know those iterations, get to know the variables. And then once you understand the variables or the paths, the routes that somebody else took to get to where they want, you can apply that to your own life. You say, okay, how can I take this and reiterate on it, but according to my strengths, my specialties, my passions, my gifts, right? And from here, I can begin to reverse engineer. If I have a successful example of what I want, I can look at that end goal. I can look at all the pieces that contribute and make up that end goal, and then work backwards, right? Because now I've got all the variables. I know exactly what constitutes my ideal, and I take those back to my own personal drawing board, and I begin to iterate them as many times as possible with the consciousness of already being what it is that I want to be. This is the most important thing that I can do, because it gets me there the most efficiently and the quickest, right? And here's the question you have to ask yourself. Do you want to get there with a bunch of unnecessary roadblocks? Or you want to get there leveraging everybody else's wisdom, right? Making as little of your own mistakes as possible, right? That's normal for all of us. You know, we want to make as little of our own mistakes as possible. It is wise to take the wisdom of other people and begin to integrate it into your own life. And wisdom is the byproduct of experience and failure, right? So finding successful iterations of what it is that you actually want, this gives you the power to understand many of the variables that are involved in creating the success that you want to create. It's not that it's hard or confusing, it's that it requires you to put that successful iteration into your life. You have to go out, get out of your comfort zone, find the people, find the examples of what it is that you want, or at least if it's not exactly what you want, things that are closest to that. Because as you do that, you're going to find yourself, honestly, you're probably going to find yourself autonomically experimenting and putting variables into place. If that's all you consume yourself with, you're going to find yourself doing that over and over and over and over again. And this is perfect when it leads us into our next point, which is the process of habit building, right? This is a process of taking the character creation, designing according to your ideals, agency, identity, right? Reverse engineering, and putting it into a daily process that you can use, right? And here's the thing about habit trackers, about creating new habits. It's not just, there's not this one size fits all. You have to figure out what works for you. For myself, I continue to iterate, right? What works for me today is probably going to be different in 10 years, because I'm going to be a different person doing different things, right? What I have to figure out is not only where I want to be and begin to embody those habits as much as possible, but I, at the same time, have to have that balance, right? Of not completely overwhelming myself. So like if you've never lifted to the gym in your life, and then you go and you try and lift 200-pound weights, right? That's not going to work. It's not going to work, right? It takes time to get to that place. So once you have those high-level successful iterations, you can then begin to break them down into smaller goals, right? We can call them SMART goals. You can get a SMART goal worksheet if you need to. Break those bigger constitutions down into singular goals that you can iterate on. And what I really encourage you to do is don't move on until you feel that you've gotten one down. You know what I mean? It's your job to not just do it, but do it well, right? Because it's not just the habits you build, it's the quality of the habits that you build. If the habit that you build involves mindlessness and just doing something so you can go through the ropes because you think it's going to get you where you want to go, chances are that's not going to get you where you want to go. And if it does, you're going to see the lack of intention and quality in the results that you get in your life. It never fails. We experience the sum total of our beliefs about ourselves. So it's better for you, as you're going through this process of habit building, of falling in love with the process, of finding yourself in a place where you're enjoying and immersing yourself in the moment, right? Whether that's lifting weights, whether that's cleaning your house, whether that's writing an email, whether that's doing a sales presentation. Your job is to be in the moment, to be present, to be mindful, to be fully here. You need to give yourself that moment of presence. So many freaking successful people cannot enjoy the fruits of their success because they don't know how to sit still. They don't know how to be quiet. They don't know how to be mindful, right? They're constantly mindless. So many people don't get to enjoy the life that they build for themselves because they're too obsessed with getting to the next moment, getting to the next thing. And I can guarantee you that very behavior, that mindset, that concept, that story, that belief, it perpetuates unconscious suffering. It perpetuates unfulfillment, which is the opposite of what we want here, right? You want to create a fulfilled life. You want to create an ideal life. So because you want to create an ideal life, the habits that you build to get you to that place, they need to be done mindfully. They need to be done intentionally. You can't half-ass it, right? Your job is to focus, be intentional and mindful about the habits that you build as they're leading you to the person that you become. Because the truth is, once you hit your goal, you're immediately going to have a next one. It's the truth. Once you hit your revenue goal, you're going to have another one. Once you hit your body goal, you're going to have another one, right? You're always going to have more goals, but you're always going to have an opportunity to be present in the moment. And being present, being intentional, right? And you hear this, I hear this a lot from bodybuilders, being intentional about your lifts, right? Really feeling into every curl, every pull-up, whatever kind of lifting you're doing, whether it's a body or a weight. Intentional lifting, intentional work, right? Intentional eating, intentional writing, intentional selling, always better for long-term habit building than just going through the ropes, than just being mindless, right? Your job here is not just to build your habits, but to build them mindfully. To go throughout your day, living your life as though you are what you want to be, with all the presence and intention of that. This is where a lot of people get messed up. They make a lot of money, they lose it all, or maybe they make a lot of money and their life is total. And I know it. I know people, I know multimillionaires who are absolutely destitute. And it sucks because the one thing they don't want to look at is themselves, because you are the root and the solution to all of your problems. And that's never going to change. And that's really where we get into the process of belief stacking, right? See, because what happens here is as you take that agency, that responsibility, you take that identity and you begin to embody the life that you want to live. You begin to design your life according to your ideals. You begin to reverse engineer, right? You begin to build the habits of the person that you want to be. All of a sudden, you begin to give yourself evidence that you are what you want to be. You begin to actually support the beliefs that you're creating inside of yourself, which solidifies the neural pathways. And we call this belief stacking. And it's amazing because if you take this just a one-day process, you'd be surprised how amazing it works, right? If you have a goal, a deadline, right, or some sort of ideal that you want to embody, you take that first thing in the morning, you really get into the spirit of it, allow yourself to entertain images that would imply that you are already that person, stimulations, mental scenarios, physical scenarios in your body that would imply that you're already that person, and you go throughout your day attempting to do the things that that person does, you're going to find that it is actually a lot easier to do so. Because if you wake up with the belief that you can't do it, you're not worthy, you don't have this, you don't have that, blah, 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 you're going to be sluggish, and you've probably experienced this. Or you're going to be sluggish, you're going to be slow, you're not going to like what you're doing, you're not going to be enthusiastic, everybody's going to see right through you, and you're not going to have any evidence to support that you actually are what you want to be. And this is what I love about the process of belief stacking, because if you get into the spirit in the morning of actually being what you want to be, and then you go throughout your day of actually living and operating from that place, you're going to find that people and the world tends to respond from that place. The only time it doesn't is when you're pretentious. And this is exactly how I've manifested multi-billion-dollar opportunities, is because I go throughout my day knowing my ideal, living as though I already am that. I don't give room to the fucking lack, right? To the faithlessness of doubt and unworthiness. Those have no place in my life. And that's what you need to determine at the end of all of this, is what place does unworthiness, does undeservedness have in your life? It has none. It has zero. It has zilch. Unless you give it that space, unless you give it room to breathe. Suffocate your limitations with the fullness of your ideals, and you will find yourself running at breakneck pace towards everything that you ever want. And I think this is most people's biggest problem, is they're too afraid of getting everything that they want, because getting everything that you want implies that you are as powerful as you want to be. It implies that you can transform your life, and not just your life, but everybody else's life. And as a species, this implies that we no longer have to live at the beholden of people who think they have their best interests in our heart. And that's why I love this conversation, because it gets us to a place of sovereignty as a species. It gets us to a place where we're no longer pandering to leadership that has no business trying to lead us. It empowers you to create the life of your dreams without relying on anybody else's safety to do so. You are the totality of the universe experiencing itself, and it's about time that you step into the fullness of that. And every moment that you do not step into that fullness, that'll be reflected back to you. This journey of creating your ideal life, of stepping into main character energy, it requires all of you. But I can guarantee you, if you take the framework that we discussed today, if you take it and you run with it and you integrate it, you're going to find yourself stepping into that main character energy a lot sooner than you think. And not just stepping into it, but embodying it and experiencing it and watching people treat you differently and watching the results that you get change, because you're no longer living like an extra. You're no longer living like you don't deserve everything that you want. You're living in the fullness of your purpose, the fullness of your worth, the fullness of your goodness. And this is the most important thing that you can do. And so I've had such a blast sharing this 7-point framework with you today. If you've enjoyed this, man, continue to come back, share your thoughts with me. I want to see how you integrate this process. But I've had such an amazing time with you today. Any questions you have, I'm more than happy to answer them, more than happy to hang out and do whatever we need to do to help you get to where you need to go. Make sure to sign up for Mike's letter, the monthly newsletter from Reality Hacker. I believe in you. You're amazing. You're powerful. You're worthy and you're loved. Everything that you want also wants you. We'll talk to you soon.